What's going on, y'all? This is Encyclopedia Mac. I'm doing my next album review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Temptations' second album, the Temptations Sing Smokey. Now, usually with these videos, I try to give you, when I start with a new artist, I try to give a bio on the artist. But pretty much everybody knows the Temptations story, and it would take so long for me to explain. I'm just going to kind of skip that. I might possibly go back to that later. Sometime I'll probably review their first album, Meet the Temptations, but I'm just gonna skip that this time because I don't want my videos to be too long and it's just too long of a history. But the Temptations Sing Smokey. This was the Temptations' second album, like I mentioned. It was released on February of 1965. It went to number one on the R&B chart, which was Cashbox at that time because I think there was a payola scandal in the industry, so they didn't technically have an R&B chart. It was just the Cashbox, but number one on the R&B chart and 35 on the pop chart. The album is pretty much self-explanatory. It was called Temptations Sing Smokey because Smokey Robinson wrote and produced all the songs on the album, along with Robert Rogers, Warren Moore, and Ronald White of the Miracles. And I have to say this off the bat: Temptations Sing Smokey. I think this is the best Temptation album that they ever made. This and probably Mellow Mood. And what I mean by that, everybody has their opinion as far as the tracks, but this is a perfect album. I mean, you couldn't find a weak spot if you wanted to. I can't find a weak spot on this album at all. Like, the only thing you can probably say is you wish it was longer. But at the same time, it's short and sweet. It's one of those albums you put in and you just vibe, and you vibe from the minute you press play, and next thing you know, the album's over. Like, every song on this album is a winner. Like, every song on this album could have been released as a single. I mean, the album is just that strong. I don't have any flaws at all whatsoever for this album at all. And also, this is the as it's known today, the Classic Five combination with David Ruffin, Eddie Kendricks, Paul Williams, Otis Williams, and Melvin Franklin. That combination, as they consider, maybe the best combination of all time, or one of the best musical combinations of all time, and also just the magic as far as the temps. It's like catching lightning in a bottle. It's hard to get singers like this together. Um, I'm gonna talk about the singles that they released on this album. They put the way you do things you do on this album, I guess, because it just fit, with the 12 album sequence. But of course, that came out on their first album, Meet the Temptations. I guess they just threw it on here. That was released in January 1964, but they put that on here as well. They released two singles. First single, My Girl, which was released December 21st, 1964. It was recorded on September 25th of 1964. That was the A side, and then the B side was Nobody But My Baby. It's a leftover track from 1963, and if you can't find, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look online or get the Temptations 50th anniversary singles collection, and you'll see Nobody But My Baby on there. There's several songs on that album that were B sides that weren't released as A side singles. So if you don't have the original vinyl or can come across that, you probably won't get them because they just, back in those days, sometimes they release B side singles that weren't necessarily on albums. It just depended. But My Girl was hit out the gate. David Ruffin, his first um, lead single that was released, and it went to number one R&B on the pop chart and number one R&B chart. R&B chart and pop number one, and it went to 43 on the UK, and it became the Temptations as well as really Motown's trademark song. It's the song that just everybody knows, and there's a story behind this. David just came to the group maybe January of, I think, it was like January '63. I think David got into the group. No, early, yeah, January. I think, yeah, January '64. David joined the group, so he was in the group, not too long. And sometime around there, David hadn't led any singles just yet, but um, they had, like, they would let when they had live shows. Temptations were always a group that performed, so they had a lot of live shows, and they would perform a medley of the Drifters song called on the Boardwalk. If y'all remember that song by the Drifters, and there was, I wish I could play it. If you look around for they did a 50th anniversary Motown podcast and they went down like different interviews with the artists about different songs, and they talked with Smokey and Otis on one of the podcasts talking about My Girl, and they actually had a clip. I'm not sure whether it was possibly when they performed at the Copa or before David sang My Girl. I'm not sure, but they did a medley of On the Boardwalk, and David was is a naturally like a second tenor, raspy second tenor. His voice is naturally raspy. Now his voice became raspier as the time went on, but he always had a raspy voice. But on this particular song, on the Boardwalk, he sang in like a smooth second tenor, like it's really smooth, And I think Smokey heard that, it's that's interesting. I'm so used to this guy, singing rough, man. If I have him singing something smooth, that'll be sounding something that'll sound different. And at that time, he said, everybody was kind of jumping on Eddie Kendricks because he had the first hit with the way you do the things you do. So he decided to try David, and blew up. Like I said, became that trademark song. Now what's interesting is, um, according to the singles collection, because as the story has been told, it was David's first lead. But according to the singles collection, you'll lose a precious love was David's first lead. My Girl might have been David's first lead single that was released, but it says you lose a precious love was recorded on March 2nd, 1964. That was about 6 months before My Girl, unless the lead vocals were done 6 months after. Which most of the when they recorded tracks, they usually did it within the same month, maybe the next month at the latest. So that's interesting. I think you lose a precious love was recorded actually before was David's first lead as a Temptation. And that makes sense at the time. Smokey was, he was working with the Temps all the time, so he probably was trying different things and stuff like that. So that's really interesting. I think "You Lose a Precious Love" was actually recorded, was David's actual first lead as a Temptation, I think, and "My Girl" I believe was the second. But as the first single they released, they came back um, with "It's Growing" as the second single. That was recorded in January 7th, 1965. It was released on March 18th, 1965, and went to number 3 on the R&B charts and number 18 on the pop charts, as well as 45 in the UK. And the B that was the A side. The B side was "What Love Has Joined Together." Two great songs. "It's Growing" is Smokey was always good with those metaphors. So this is a song kind of for his metaphors, kind of similar to the kind of the way you do things you do. Just a bunch of metaphors about how a man's love is growing. So Smokey's a great songwriter, so he did a great job with those metaphors. So it's another classic single. And like I said, you can't go wrong with this album. I mean, every song could have been released as a single. I guess they just released those two singles, and that was good enough. So they kind of moved on. But there's so many highlights. I can be here all day, but I'll go through a couple of them. "Baby, Baby, I Need You." That was actually a leftover track from 1963. Eddie and Paul share a lead, do a great job on that as well. And also, "You Lose a Precious Love," like I mentioned before. This is a very interesting song because this is the first and only song where David sang a song completely in falsetto. And like I said, David is not trying to toot David's horn, but I have to be honest, he's definitely one of the greatest singers of all time. Like very few, there's not a whole lot of singers, especially who has like a naturally raspy voice like he does, that just has the range he does. You can. What's interesting is this song actually was released as the B side of "Ain't Too Proud to Beg" in 1966. You can really see the dynamics of night and day. Like on "Ain't Too Proud to Beg," you hear the strong, powerful, raspy voice, and this you hear the falsetto. So he sang this song completely in falsetto. Very, very interesting, man. David is just an incredible singer. And like I said, it's something different because for some reason, they never tried it again. I guess they found a different formula, especially when they went into more of the rougher edge kind of music. But I would have liked to hear David, singing falsetto even more. Just would have been interesting to hear. But fantastic song. Definitely a great song. Also, "Who's Loving You," another David Ruffin lead vocal. David gave another great performance. If you listen to it, you can tell that Michael Jackson was definitely inspired by this version. A lot of his phrasing is the same as David's, or similar to David's on this song, especially the ending, the little falsetto ending. Um, "What's So Good About Goodbye." This is another Eddie lead. I love this song. This is my song that has like my favorite backgrounds. The backgrounds are extra crisp. You can definitely hear Paul Williams' strong voice in the backgrounds. Also, Paul also did lead on "You Beat Me to the Punch." Another great lead by him. This was actually a hit for Mary Wells. And like I said, the whole you can't. Every song is great in this album. Then the final song is like the magic trick, the rabbit out the hat trick. It's Eddie singing "You Can Depend on Me." I mean, this is a beautiful song. Eddie's extra smooth. Eddie is at the height of his powers. I think this is Eddie's finest moment, his greatest performance as a singer for the Temps, in my opinion. Like he's at the height of his power, extra smooth. It has that real churchy gospel sound. You can hear the backgrounds, crisp, and together. Like I said, Eddie's just showing off, and he's at his finest moment to me. And that ends the album. I mean, you can't ask for a better album. And like I said, this album, it's like I said, it's just a perfect album, and just everything is pushed back to where it's evened out. Because I mean, of course, music progresses, and music changes, and their material became a little bit more, I get quote unquote mature or rough edge with more instrumentation, the kind of stuff. But this is more of like their harmonies are more doo-wop type of sound, more gospel type of sound, and the instruments are real smooth. It's like kind of eased back to where their vocals um are more the forefront than the instrumentation is, or especially when it, like after like 75, it became where the music was more overshadowing their voices. But this album is pulled back to where you can really focus on their harmonies, and the music is kind of just icing on the cake. But like I said, this is the Temptations' best album to me. This and Mellow Mood. It's a perfect album. 5 stars definitely. I would give it 10 if I could. But that's pretty much it with this album. I hope y'all enjoyed this review. Feel free to comment if you have any questions or any comments. Feel free to leave them. Y'all have a nice day.